Welcome to our Lunch and Learn workshop series. This is the first of 3 that we have planned for this year, and actually this is the second year. This is a brand new program to the Keyport St. Lucie Beautiful. And before I continue and introduce our guest speaker, I'm just going to share a little bit about Keyport St. Lucie Beautiful and some interesting litter information, and especially as it pertains to water, our theme today. But first, please say hello to our partners, I hope they're in the room, that make this workshop, today's workshop, possible. So Botanical Gardens graciously hosted this, or gave us this venue to use today. So thank you to all our Botanical Gardens friends and partners. And also, without the speakers, why we did this is we wanted to partner with professionals all across the county that help us educate and bring awareness on environmental stewardship themes. And what better way than to have Dr. Edie Widder here today. Thank you so much, Dr. Edie Widder. And she's the founder of ORCA, and you're going to get to know her in just a bit. And also, I wish to thank our lunch provider, Mission Barbecue. They graciously donated their service today to serve their food. So we selected water as a theme for a few reasons. Not only, of course, is it vital to our health, right, and in all forms of life, but did you know that June 8th is World Ocean Day? So we knew that was this month. And then St. Lucie Aquarium, just so you know, they are going to have a celebration for that on June 8th, so you can visit them from 10 to 2. And July 23rd is the Treasure Coast Waterway cleanup. So this is a good time to have a water as theme. And Keyport St. Lucie Beautiful will be the host captain for the site, captain host, so we hope you can come on out. You have to register online. And then finally, keeping litter out of the waterways is apparent to marine life, wildlife, and our own life as well, as we've come to find out. So let's go into Keyport St. Lucie Beautiful. So our mission every single day is engaging with individuals of all ages, because we work with children, adults, young people, older people, to help them think about the environment and to engage them to think of ways they could be a better steward of the environment. And so we're actually tied to 2 city strategic goals. The City of Port St. Lucie has strategic goals, and we are goal number 1, safe, clean, and beautiful, and tied to number 2, vibrant neighborhoods. And so that's why we are here, to educate and bring awareness to the truth that quality of life begins with personal responsibility. And we help, we engage with folks, like I said, every day. And I love quotes. Socrates once said, "I cannot teach anybody anything, I can only make them think." And that's why we're here as well, to help people think. So how did she become what she was? Keyport St. Lucie Beautiful. We're actually 21 years old now. 34 years ago, Public Works came into existence. And then Dr. Street program came a little bit later because they were thinking, how can we do litter control even better than what we're doing? Public Works was solely responsible for the litter control with our staff and our equipment. So they created the Adopt a Street program. And volunteers could adopt a mile roadway near their house and pick up litter once a month or more. And that helped. Several years later, they thought, okay, let's go even deeper. And that's when Keyport St. Lucie Beautiful Committee came about, a volunteer committee, and they were charged with the citywide cleanup day. They were in charge of beautification projects and worked with the Adopt a Street. And we are affiliates to Keep America Beautiful and Keep Florida Beautiful as well. Now, you probably don't even know this, but we have a lot of programs and services. We host many events. We participate in the community with outreach events. We speak at HOAs. We go into the schools. We partner with them for Arbor Day and give tree seedling giveaway every Arbor Day. And we do other projects as well with them. America's Recycle Day is something, too, that we do to bring awareness on how we can improve recycling. Buddy Bench Project was one of the initiatives that touched upon all our facets of our mission. And we also had an author come in, and we did virtual presentations. And in 2019, our city manager, again, every day we're always about how can we do this better. We're always looking to improve and go deeper. So he asked us to meet with city departments because he wanted an action plan to eradicate litter. So we developed a litter eradication team, and LEAP was born. That's a litter eradication action plan. Now, when you're talking about litter control, it's about personal responsibility, but it's about how do we change behavior. So there's 5 components that make that happen. You have education, awareness, infrastructure, partnership, enforcement, and incentives, and they're intertwined. One without the other won't work. You can only educate so much. Sometimes it takes enforcement. Sometimes it's just incentive and reminders. So we have several things. The litter control program is our public works department, our environmental services contractors, Adopt a Street volunteers. We also have the litter crew, and they have a schedule that they work every single day. They're out and about. They have a schedule, but then they also work off of service requests that come in from the 1PSL app or our litter hotline. And did I mention St. Lucie County Sheriff's Inmate Work Program. We also partner with them, and they help us with the hard-to-reach areas. Now, I'm so excited, I'm so proud. Adopt a Street program, and it's actually Adopt a Spot as well. So folks, if they want to do a retention pond, they can adopt that pond. We celebrate 30 years this year. It's a big deal. This program has grown, yes, from 20-something in the beginning to 137, I think we're at now. And since January alone, they helped pick up 20,000 pounds plus of litter, and they contributed 1,800 plus volunteer hours. So that is huge. And that program provides a sense of belonging, and it helps people to connect with something bigger than themselves. We have youth. We had high schooler won an award with a state award because she started a group. This year we had one start 2 groups. So our young people are quite the achievers. Now, our cigarette litter prevention program is also one of the litter control initiatives. It helps keep the cigarette butts off the ground. And our campaign this year, again, we're going to focus on commercial properties because we pay attention to the information that comes into us. And commercial property seems to be the hot spots where a lot of litter gets generated and ends up in the roadways and waterways. So since 2020 actually, we've given over 42 ash receptacles to business partners that said, I want to be a part of this. I want to keep our city clean and beautiful. And Wayne, he's actually our first Adopt a Street ambassador. This is a new initiative we did a year ago, that those volunteers that stepped up and were constantly showing up and wanting to help and do more, this was an opportunity for them to develop and learn more about our program. He took over as facilitator of this program, and he personally delivers the ash receptacles to businesses and takes photos. So we encourage all our Adopt Street volunteers, if they want to take that next step of leadership, to become an ambassador.
Keep Port St. Lucie Beautiful invites you to join our efforts to prevent litter. Cigarette butts are the #1 form of litter, and although small, they are deadly to our environment. Cigarettes are not biodegradable and can end up in our waterways. You can help by disposing of cigarette butts in proper receptacles. Contact Keep Port St. Lucie Beautiful to receive free portable ashtray or litter stands while supplies last. Visit our website at www.cityofpsl.com/KPSLB for more information.
Cleanup Day. As part of the Great American Cleanup, we host an annual citywide event. This has been going on for many years now, 27 I believe, and since 2014 when we've started tracking the data officially, we've collected over 22,174 pounds of litter. And as you can see, this was just this last April. We usually have over 300 folks come out this year due to the conflict. There's a lot of things going on in the community. We had almost 200 volunteers come out, and they helped pick up 4,000 pounds. And that's a citywide. So they would just go and see where they could, where the need was. Everything we do, remember, ties back to our mission. So Household Hazardous Waste Collection Day, the why we do it is listed there. If you can see it, it's kind of tiny. But to prevent illegal dumping is the biggest one. And to help recycling is #2. So some of the e-waste that comes in, we recycle those. The propane tanks, they reuse them if they can. The fire extinguishers, we partner with IRSC, the Fire Academy, and they use them. So, and did you know too, the illegal dumping's huge with the liquids. So we try to prevent it and then keep it out of the waterways, because if it goes in the ground, it's going in the water. And in 2021, we actually had 900 folks come out, and 385 cars came in March, and that was 15,534 pounds. So just think of that. It also keeps it out of the landfill as best as possible, those chemicals. So that's a good thing for our environment. And then, of course, increasing our tree canopy helps our climate. And we host 2 events a year now. It used to be 1, but in response to the resident need and request, we do 2. And we just gave 500 trees away this past May. And to date, since we've started collecting data, there's been over 12,932 trees that found homes on private property. So this is a partnership between the residents that they want to do this as well. And we are still doing the tree challenge, so we log everything that we're doing. And Appreciation Night, why do we do that? We partner with the St. Lucie Mets and also Treasure Coast Food Bank. It's our thank you to our community. Thank you for caring about your city. You come out for a free baseball game with a donation to the Treasure Coast Food Bank, and then we're helping families. And so that partnership's been many years now, and since it started, 13,000 plus pounds of food have come in. And as part of our LEAP, we said, how can we go deeper and create new partnerships? So we worked with Parks and Recreation Summer Camp Program, and we created a contest for the youth to do a litter prevention PSA. And we had young man, I can't remember, Caden, do this.
Don't throw trash on our earth. Ask yourself, what is it worth? Now here's why you should respect the nature. The only thing melting is our North glaciers. We should be on top like the Kansas City Chiefs, but instead we're on the bottom with the dying coral reefs. The water is warm and our earth is on fire. Everything is gone, nearly haywire. What do? We do our part. Keep PSL safe and to heart. This is our town and we need to keep it clean because everyone knows that pollution is a fiend. Don't throw trash on our earth. Ask yourself, what is it worth?
We're so proud of that. So like I said, we engage with folks of all ages, and we went into the younger kids and we did a presentation, and they made a little succulent plant container using recycled water bottles. Our committee members come up with ideas, and we work of how we can make it fun and engaging for the kids. And I forgot to mention, with our youth educational program, we work with teachers in the local classrooms, and we come in and talk about litter and improving recycling and beautification, and we give them a book for their library that teaches the kids about that. So Keep America Beautiful, you may have heard about them. They released their 2020 litter study. It's huge. 90% of Americans do think litter is a problem in their state. And there was 4 major components: the survey examining public attitudes about litter, visible litter survey, to give an estimate number of litter on the ground across the United States, and also behavioral observations that shed light on the littering behavior, and a survey that gets a public cost of what it costs to pick up litter. And that's available at their website. Yeah. So 25.9 million pieces of litter were along the shores of 10.7 million center miles of the United States waterways. That's a big deal. And so first you have to understand what the issue is, and then we think of creative ways, how can we solve it? And cigarette butts do remain the #1 form of litter, as you'll see. This I'm just showing you real briefly. Top littered items 4+, other plastics. So plastics came to the top with cigarette butts. And there's your small items, plastic bags, again, plastic and cigarette butts. And this is the stormwater drain, top 10 top littered items. So you have cigarette butts, other plastics, paper, metal, other film, and it's pretty sad. And then your coastal, broken glass, and plastic, and cigarette butts. So now you know why we offer the ash receptacle cups and have a cigarette litter prevention program in the city. And I love numbers, but this one got my attention. This was from the EPA. I participated in a webinar most recently, a Trash-Free Waters webinar, and they were talking about reducing plastic pollution. And this was Every minute, one garbage truck of plastic is dumped into the ocean, and 8 million tons of plastic enter into the ocean each year. That's a visual. That's a real visual to take. You know, it's one thing to talk about it, and it's another to try to solve it, but there's better ways, and they list a whole bunch. I have a copy of this. I can email it to you if you'd like, because I'm going to be running out of time, so I want to introduce our guest speaker. But I just wanted to touch, there is solution. There is hope. And our water wrap up, just so you know, we passed out some swale information. We can help right now, every day, just by looking in front of our own home and making sure our swale liners are clear. For number one, it keeps the stormwater flowing easily to prevent the flooding. Plus, it keeps the litter and debris out of it if you're cleaning it on a regular basis, and that prevents things going in further into the waterways down the way. Remember, there is a fertilizer ban in effect, so check your St. Lucie County website on that. And water quality. Our city's utility department has a report they put out, and you could get that on the city website, but your water quality here is very, very, very good. And they serve over 85,000 customers, so check out the website for that. We care about water here, and I'm glad we all got a break through the storm to come today, and then we're gonna hunker down this weekend. But so how you can get involved right now? Adopt a street or spot. If you're a business, or you know a business, if they don't have an ash receptacle stand in front of their business, ask why not and tell them about our program. We can bring it to them. Come to the Treasure Coast Waterway Cleanup, report litter with our hotline or 1PSL app. And then number one, Keep America Beautiful. From that study they did, they determined that if every person just picked up 152 pieces of litter across our nation, we would have no litter problem. So the challenge is, that's their campaign. So if you pick up 152 pieces, take some photos, tag the city, and let us know. Let's do this together. Now, before I leave this podium, it's my great pleasure of introducing our speaker. These workshops are better when we have partners. And so we appreciate Dr. Edie Widder coming today, and she's the founder of ORCA. She is the CEO and scientist of the Ocean Research and Conservation Association, and she's going to describe how ORCA has focused on finding what actions are most needed to reserve the downward trend of the Indian River Lagoon. So thank you, Dr. Widder. Come on up. We'll get you situated here.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here with a group of like-minded people. It's lovely to hear a report like that and hear that there are so many people getting involved in making a difference. When I was asked to speak, I was given two assignments. One was to talk about the book that I just put out, which I'm going to do just briefly, just kind of as background as how I came to be here and start ORCA. The book is actually a memoir, which is something I never planned to write in my life. As a scientist, we're taught never to say anything in the first person. And so the first time it was suggested to me that I should write a memoir, I said I have no idea how to do that. And the literary agent that suggested it was very persistent. And he kept coming back and finally wore me down. And so this book just came out this past year. And it talks about my adventures in deep sea biology. It starts out actually with one of the hairiest adventures I had with water coming into a submersible. But it also talks about the beauty of the deep sea and the bioluminescence, all the amazing creatures in the ocean that make light. And that was what actually brought me to the Treasure Coast, because I was working out at the University of California in Santa Barbara, and I made a series of dives in some new tools for ocean exploration. One was a suit called WASP that was developed by the offshore oil industry for diving on oil rigs down to 2,000 feet. And the other was a single-person submersible called Deep Rover. And in both cases, I had to be trained as a pilot to be able to use these. And I just became absolutely hooked on this phenomenon of animals making light. The first deep dive I made with WASP was in the Santa Barbara Channel, and it was a late evening dive. I went down to 800 feet, and I turned out the lights. And I turned out the lights because I knew I would see bioluminescence. I didn't discover it or anything, but I just was totally unprepared for how much there was. All these creatures making light. It was like a fireworks display, spews and sparkles and just glitter everywhere. And if I activated the thrusters on the suit, I'd see these vortices of neon blue light swirling up out of the thrusters, mixed with embers that look like when you throw a log on a campfire and the embers swirl up, only these were icy blue embers. And I knew enough about bioluminescence and the energy it takes I did mute it, to realize, this has got to be one of the most important processes in the ocean, and I can't understand why more people aren't studying it. And so I've been studying it ever since. But to do that, I needed submersibles, and there were very few midwater submersibles in the world, and it turns out the best for my kind of research were the Johnson Sealing submersibles here on the Treasure Coast. So my husband and I moved here in 1989. We got a house on the water, with a deep water dock. We just thought we'd move to paradise. We used to see roseate spoonbills fly over our house every morning when I went out to get the paper, back when we got a paper. And boy, am I popular. We would see manatees come up to our dock. Otters get out on our dock and scratch their backs on the dock posts. It was just magnificent. And around 2004, Harbor Branch started to wind down their submersible program, and I was starting to think about moving on. But about that same time, a couple of reports had come out, the Pew Oceans Commission report and the U.S. Commission on Ocean Policy report, detailing the deteriorating state of the ocean. And I thought, I've spent my career in basic science, maybe it's time to switch gears and try to get back to the ocean. And so that was the impetus for me to start the Ocean Research and Conservation Association, with the idea of responding to what was called for in both of these major reports, that we needed to have more advanced monitoring capability if we were going to be able to deal with these problems. You can't fix a problem until you define it. And we weren't doing the kind of monitoring that needed to be done. And so I thought, okay, I've spent my career working with engineers to develop technologies for new ways to explore the deep sea. I could work with engineers to develop these kinds of technologies as well. And the concept, the business model, was that we were going to develop these water quality monitors that we called Kilroys, because we hoped they would be everywhere, like that Uber GI of World War II fame. And that then the sale of the Kilroys would fund our basic research, or applied research, I should say, into what was most impactful on the environment and what actions we could be taking to improve the environment. Unfortunately, 2008 came along and everything crashed. I actually would not have survived, ORCA would not have survived, except I got a MacArthur Fellowship, and I sunk every penny of that money back into ORCA to keep it afloat. And so now we're in a situation where we had three centers. We had ORCA Engineering, which is up at Satellite Beach, ORCA Center for Citizen Science in Vero Beach, and until this last year, we had our main office on Seaway Drive on the Fort Pierce Inlet. But we, with 60 days notice, were told we needed to move out. It was a lease, so they certainly had the right to do that, but it was very unexpected. And I'm very proud to say we now have a new headquarters that we're going to be moving into, I think, so long as the closing goes right, that will put us in Vero Beach. That's where our headquarters is going to be. But we have boats out on the water, and we go the whole 156-mile length of the Indian River Lagoon. So in the time I've been living here, I've seen a pretty remarkable change, as I think probably many of you have, with what was once called the most biologically diverse estuary in the United States, turning into this algae-dominated system that is getting us a kind of reputation that I don't think we want, because this is impacting our tourism dollars and our real estate values, which are the two major income streams for Florida. But nobody wants to come and live in a place where the water's so toxic there's actually signs that say don't touch the water. And there are health implications for us and our children and our pets that aren't being discussed nearly enough, because this is really becoming a very serious problem. We've had kind of a multicolored impact. We've had red tide, mostly coming around from the west coast on the loop current. We've had brown tide in the northern part of the lagoon. Brown tide isn't toxic the way these other two are, but it is just so dense it blocks out the sunlight and killed off the seagrass meadows, and also caused a bloom that caused a fish kill. And then we have these toxic blue-green algae blooms that have hit the southern part of the lagoon, largely because of the dumps from Lake Okeechobee. And this fish kill in the northern part of the Indian River Lagoon was devastating. Normally when you have a fish kill, it's just a few species, often just one species that's impacted, the most susceptible given the circumstances. This was everything. It was just absolutely everything. Even there's puffer fish mixed in there. But there's, red drum, which were part of the brood stock. So it's seriously impacted the fishing charters. A lot of people have had to just move on. And then over this past year, we've been getting news like this about the incredible number of manatees that have been dying. And most of this has been attributed to the brown tide blocking out the sunlight and killing the seagrass meadows, which is what the manatees survive on. So this is a pretty grim situation. And then this kind of bloom in the southern part of the lagoon, that's not photoshopped. That's what it looked like. And looking at it is bad enough, but if you smelled it, you know just how really nasty it was. The best description I've heard is it was kind of a cross between vomit and poopy diapers. You're welcome. So, when the wind would change in the afternoon, the people that were downwind of it were just devastated by it. And Martin Memorial Hospital saw a major uptick in admissions related to this bloom due to respiratory distress and other problems. So there have been blooms, major blooms in 2005, 2013, this one in 2016, and 2018. And it's going to probably continue to happen as long as we've got the dumps from Lake Okeechobee turning the water fresh. But the thing is, it isn't just in the southern part of the lagoon, because our canals are fresh water, and microcystis, which is the blue-green algae that produces this toxin called microcystin, grows in those canals. And we actually have quite a bit of data on just how damaging microcystin is. It attacks the liver. And microcystis has been a major problem in China for many years. Their water supplies are contaminated with microcystin, and they've gone a long way to establishing the linkage between these blooms and liver cancer. That's a pretty clear-cut line, and one of my concerns, one of our discoveries when we started putting out monitors, was how often we're having what we call hidden toxic algae blooms in the canals. They're cryptic in the sense that they aren't visible. You're not seeing that neon green at the surface, but our sensors are telling us that there's microcystis and in fact microcystin in the water. And that water, that fresh water in the canals, is being used to irrigate our food crops. And it turns out food crops can take up microcystin. Now, it doesn't bioaccumulate, so probably the dosages aren't too serious depending on how much of that crop you're eating. But what happens is that it diminishes the crop yield. So we did some experiments in our lab where we were just trying to see if we could detect microcystin in food, specifically lettuce that had been grown with a very low dose of microcystin. And we had a control, and we had 10 parts per billion microcystin, and the 10 parts per billion microcystin irrigation produced a stunted crop. And so what does a farmer do when he sees reduced yield? He puts on more fertilizer, which then feeds the toxic algae blooms. So we get to be in a vicious cycle. And you know things are getting serious when they're showing up in major national campaigns. 5 signs of microcystin in water: bad taste, dog, bird, and livestock deaths, fish and aquatic plant deaths, adverse health effects in animals, adverse health effects in humans. Obviously, they're trying to sell their filters, but it works, and it's something that you need to be thinking about, having filters on your water supply. Microcystin, that one is pretty well established. There's another toxin that's produced by blue-green algae, some of the blue-green algae blooms that we've been having here, and it's known as BMAA, or beta-methylaminoalanine. And back in 2020, Dr. Walter Bradley, who was ALS expert, Lou Gehrig's disease expert, and former chairman of the University of Miami Department of Neurology, put forth this op-ed indicating how serious he thought this problem could be for Floridians. Failure to act on evidence presented by mounting scientific research is placing the long-term health of Floridians at risk, because BMAA has been connected with neurodegenerative diseases like Lou Gehrig's disease, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's. So that is not as strong a linkage as the microcystin, but it's growing, and there's more data all the time to suggest that there really is a linkage. So at ORCA, we have our byline, our reason for being is mapping pollution and finding solutions. And so we have a number of ways of doing this, from high-tech to low-tech. So we're working with colleagues actually at Ohio State University that are developing algorithms so that we can detect these toxic algae blooms from satellite imagery. We have, whoops, okay, that's not working. We have our Kilroys, our water quality monitors, that are measuring in real time a whole range of parameters in our local waterways, like the nutrients that are the drivers for many of these toxic algae blooms. We create pollution maps like you see here, where we go out and we collect sediment samples and bring them back to the lab and test them for a variety of pollutants, nutrients, toxins. And we create maps like this, where it's like a weather map, where red is hot and blue is cold, but in our maps, red is toxic or polluted and blue is not. And those have been hugely powerful for locating the sources of problems that need to be addressed. We're looking at how toxins get transferred in the food web. So this issue about microcystin's impact on the liver was kind of brought to light by a study that was put out by Ohio State University in 2015, where they took 2 national data sets. One was toxic algae blooms, and one was non-alcohol related liver disease. And they just overlaid them. And any place that they found a high correlation, they put a red spot. Well, there's one red spot in Florida, a pretty big one, and it's all around the Indian River Lagoon and Lake Okeechobee. Our suspicion is that that's probably primarily because of the number of subsistence fishermen that we have in our community. So when you come home from the airport at 2 a.m. and there's people fishing off the bridge, they're not recreational fishing. They're trying to put protein on their table. And they're eating a lot of the fish that is coming out of the Indian River Lagoon. And so we're doing studies to try to track how much the fish are accumulating microcystin and how different it is from different parts of the lagoon and in different species. And then finally, in the last panel, we have developed a really robust citizen science program where we're trying to get the community involved, much as you folks are already doing down here, because I think in the future, the only places where people are going to want to live is where communities have come together to solve these problems in a way that's mutually beneficial. We really make an issue of the fact at ORCA that we do not believe in finger pointing. We're all polluters. We just have to figure out solutions that we can all live with. So I just wanted to share with you in broad strokes a few of the things that I've come to realize are most problematic for our community. And the biggest one of all turns out to be what was done to Florida from the very get-go in order to drain the swamp, as they called it. The goal was to get the water off the land as quickly as possible, with no understanding of how important it is to be able to slow that water down and have it percolate back down into the aquifer to recharge the aquifer, and to have the slow flow as used to occur with the Kissimmee River, this wonderful 100-mile long it was a 100-mile long winding river from Orlando to Lake Okeechobee, and it used to flood its banks, and they didn't like that because it made agriculture difficult. And so they straightened out the Kissimmee, turned it into a 50-mile long deep canal, and before they'd even finished it, they knew they'd made a mistake, because Lake Okeechobee suddenly became polluted, and all the wildlife that this place was known for, fish, birds, you name it, just disappeared. And now, that was, I can't remember how many $1 million to do that, $1.8 million or something. I may be wrong on that. But it's billions now to try to put it back the way it was. And we're doing it, and it is starting to have some impact. But it's been shown again and again, when we mess with nature without having any understanding of how these systems are supposed to work, we screw it up every time. So even in our local communities, we try to get the water off the land as quickly as possible. So you have these deep water docks with seawall and sloping grass lawn right down to the seawall. And there is no way that you can mow that lawn or fertilize it or you treat it with herbicides and not have it all end up in the lagoon. And this audience, I think, is probably fully aware that if you want to farm organically, grass clippings make great fertilizer. Just put them in a bucket, add a little air bubbler if you want to speed it up. In a couple days, you got fertilizer. Well, that's what we're doing all the time to the Indian River Lagoon. Actually, I even had a picture of that. You don't even need a bioreactor. Just a bucket will do. And you can turn grass clippings into fertilizer. As a result, we see our maps looking like this. So that's the moorings in the Vero Beach area. And they have the deep water docks. And you see the amount of pollution that's built up there. This is total nitrogen in the sediment. Compared to the west shoreline, which is all mangrove, it's a phenomenal difference. And it's just a breeding ground for toxic algae blooms. The other thing is that all of this emphasis on watering grass, we have to get rid of the grass somehow. And I'm open to suggestions because I've tried several things as a homeowner, none of which I found, or I should say none of which my neighbors have found particularly satisfactory. But we're pulling water out of these precious aquifers, these amazing storage facilities for fresh water that we have beneath Florida, and we're sucking the water out to water our lawns and to flush our toilets. It makes no sense. And as we do that, we're getting saltwater intrusion. And that's not going to go away. You're contaminating these precious storage facilities for water. And we need to do it now before we're in the state that California is in right now, which is grim. It's hugely grim. And we don't need to be watering lawns. So if people can come up with alternatives that my neighbors won't complain about, I'd love to hear it. So what you want to do in all of your gardening efforts is to slow the flow. That is the most important thing that we can be doing in terms of making a difference for the Indian River Lagoon. just every place we can possibly do it. Swales are swell. Let's just use them as many ways as possible to slow the flow so that the water can trickle down through the green filter to a clean aquifer instead of becoming a gray funnel into the Indian River Lagoon. There's places up north that have figured out how important this is. For example, in the northern part of the Chesapeake Bay, they have the rivers that feed into the Chesapeake. There's agriculture along them, but they have buffered forest along the shoreline. And it makes a huge difference for slowing the flow and picking up the nutrients. And we've seen the same thing here. The moorings, partly I think with the impetus of our map, started putting in buffered shorelines. And I think they look absolutely beautiful, much better than the grass right down to the edge. But you put in native plants, so that benefits the insects and the birds. You'll see a lot more wildlife. It frames your view. It can be absolutely beautiful. So we did a pilot study with the city of Stuart at Shepherd Park. And we first of all collected water samples at the sites you see there, the drains and the runoff. And the drains are just these grates that are set in the grass, and the water runs off the grass into the grate, and then it just comes out a pipe, like you see there, with no filtration whatsoever. And when we measured those, what we found was nitrate and ammonia okay, but phosphate was off the charts. It was really high levels of phosphate. And so then we worked with the landscape architect for the city of Stuart and re-landscaped with all of these buffered shorelines. And they let us also put in signage so that we could educate the public about keeping pollution out of our waterways, benefits of buffered shorelines. And then we did, we've actually done a couple of follow-ups since the original one, and we saw a dramatic change in phosphate. So baseline phosphate, which we measured before the landscaping, is the blue, and the red is the follow-up phosphate. Huge, significant reduction that a buffered shoreline can make. And phosphate is one of the drivers for these microcystis blooms that I've been talking about. It's a big deal. So it's something as simple as a buffered shoreline can make that kind of difference. It could be low-hanging fruit in terms of improving the health of the Indian River Lagoon. We're grateful to our partners in this. We work with the University of Florida IFAS Extension, Schmidt Marine Technology Partners, the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program, One Lagoon, and City of Stuart. And then, as I mentioned, swales are swell. If you can slow the water down by having a dip and a berm and plant deep-rooted plants in the berm, it helps pull out the nutrients and slow down the water. This is what we did on our own property. This is our deep water dock home on North Hutchinson Island with grass right down to the seawall. And we replaced it with a swale. Actually, we went nuts. What we did was, and I don't recommend this, is we dug French drains all around the perimeter of our property and put in pumps so we could get all of the runoff that came off of our house and our property and put it in a tank and then use that to irrigate the grass. First of all, it still wasn't enough water without taking water from the city to irrigate, and it was unnecessarily expensive. Just putting in a swale is cheap. It's really easy. And so we put in muley grass along the top, a perennial peanut in the swale, and then sunshine mimosa over the top of the coquina rock you see there. And actually, you can't quite see it here, but the facing on the seawall, we put up something called living reef wall, and it simulates the roots of mangrove, and it's made from cement with ground up oyster shell mixed into it. And so we've got great oyster recruitment onto that to help provide habitat. So, and the other really awesome thing to do is to have a living shoreline wherever possible. And you can see that in this map, where that hook of land right there is the Moorings Golf Course. And golf courses are always getting blamed for being major sources of pollution. But they're an Audubon certified golf course, and they have living shorelines of mangroves surrounding the golf course. And so that red spot that you saw up here is not from the golf course, it's actually from St. Ed's. But the rest of it is pretty clean by comparison. So living shorelines are just a huge advantage in terms of not only pollution, but in securing the shoreline. And with the stormwater surges that we're facing and the sea level rise, this is going to become a very big deal. So living shorelines are hugely advantageous. First of all, they provide much needed habitat for wildlife. So if you talk to the old-time fishermen around here, they'll tell you about going out and casting one cast of the cast net and getting enough bait fish to shift fish offshore for a whole day. Now they go back to the same place, there's a seawall there, they cast the cast net and it comes up empty because there's no place for the little fish to hide. The reason estuaries are so important is because they provide hiding places for open ocean animals that come in to spawn because their babies can hide in the seagrass meadows and in the mangrove roots. And so estuaries are just incredibly important. So it's about habitat, but it's also about protecting our own homes. So this is a bulkheaded home, and the home next door has a living shoreline, pre-storm, post-storm. The living shoreline home, hardly any damage at all. The post-storm for the hardened shoreline, seawall is washed away, the land has been washed away. And so I want to know why we can't get in front of the secondary insurance industry and get them to incentivize homeowners. Everybody's got to replace their seawall at some point. It's cheaper to put in a living shoreline or a buffer shoreline, but a living shoreline definitely. And if they would incentivize homeowners, give them a break, if they do that, it seems like that would be a win-win-win. And people need to be made aware that mangroves can be beautiful and still allow you to have your view. You can either hedge them or window them. And then the other thing I think we really need to be thinking about, and I threw this next slide in because we were at the Botanical Gardens, is xeriscaping, just not using any water at all, and figuring out ways to make that as beautiful as possible so people aren't outraged when you do it in your own yard. So estuaries are incredibly important. They constitute only 0.3% of the world ocean area as a whole, but more than 80% of all fish and shellfish species use an estuary at some point in their life cycle. So when you're talking, estuaries, rainforests, and coral reefs are the most biodiverse habitats on the planet. If you want to help the ocean, the most important thing you can do is help save an estuary. So the things that you were talking about with the cigarette butts and the trash mitigation are hugely important, way, way beyond our own neighborhood. And I just wanted to end by talking about our citizen science program. The goal of ORCA Citizen Science is to educate and engage community members in solving the problems that are leading to the degradation of the lagoon. We have 4 major programs: a pollution mapping program, a land to sea initiative, which is creating living and buffered shorelines, a day in the life, which is an educational program that has grown enormously. In October, one day in October, we have schools and community groups all up and down the Indian River Lagoon going out and sampling. And then we have our One Health program that is looking at how toxins are accumulating in the food web. And if you want to go fishing for science, we can happily accommodate that. We are looking for target species of spotted sea trout, black drum, snapper, sheep's head, mackerel, snook, bluefish, black crappie, mullet, pompano, flounder, and whiting. And if you go to our website, it'll tell you places where you can drop the fish off. Just put it on ice and note where you caught it. You don't have to tell us your secret fishing hole. On our website, which is about to go live, I think, next week, we have a map which just has sectors, so you can tell us what sector you caught the fish from. Really important to know that about fishermen. And we need volunteers for our buffered shoreline initiative. We need help maintaining our plant nursery at our Center for Citizen Science in Vero Beach. We need help with collecting and analyzing runoff samples in St. Lucie County, and help recruiting waterfront property owners to install buffered shorelines. So there's lots of opportunities to dig in and help if you're willing and able. And with that, I will close and take questions. Thank you.